On episode 693 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Henry Abbott and discuss his book, Ballistic, the new science of injury-free athletic performance. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of The Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. This is Coach Allan. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a great interview with Henry Abbott coming up, but I do have some news that I now have permission to share. This summer, I'm going to be a grandfather. And I'm just so excited for what this means for my daughter and her husband. They've been trying pretty much, I guess, since they got married a couple years ago. And so they're super excited. I'm super excited. It's going to be really, really a whole lot of fun. But, this really got me to thinking, what kind of grandfather do I want to be? Because things have really kind of changed. Like back in the day, our day, basically people had kids in their 20s. So my grandparents were really only about 40 years older than me. They had jobs and they were doing their thing. My great grandparents that were about 60 years older than me. I'm going to be 60 years older than this kid. Okay. As a boy, that really changes the math in what things could look like. Now, my great grandparents, what I remember of them was that they were basically in rocking chairs watching us play. They never really engaged with this. They never really came out and played. And so they're just what I would call rocking chair grandparents. And that's not me. I want to be a participant in this boy's life. I do not want to be a spectator. And so I'm going to be the one crawling around on the floor or in the grass. I'm going to be running around the yard with him. I'm going to be able to jump in the pool with them and play with them. And that's what I want. I assume, because my daughter's husband comes from a large family, that it's going to be their full intent to have a lot more of these little things. So I've got a lot to live up to. I've got a lot to do. And I want to be able to play with them. I want to be a part of their play, a part of their lives at that level through my 60s, through my 70s. And then, you start thinking about it. Okay, I'm 60 years older than him. When he graduates college, I'm going to be in my 80s. And if he waits until his 30s to get married and have a child, have children, I'm going to be in my 90s. I want to be there for every single bit of it. Now, I'll tell this story. Both of our daughters, Tammy's daughter and my daughter, got married about 2 years ago. Our mothers were not in a good enough health to travel and be there. So as the result, they missed it. They missed the wedding. And that was huge. That was huge for them to not be able to be there. And there really wasn't much we could do about it. And there's just so much in front of us, so many joyful experiences that are there. And you have to ask yourself, if you're not in the condition to travel to do things, if you're not able to do these things and play and be a part of their lives, what are you missing? And it's a lot. I'm just right now telling you it's a lot. And I don't want you to miss those things. So I created the Fit for Task Bootcamp. So this is a starter program. It's a jump start. And it's basically for people who are really struggling to get started on their health and fitness. You need to be moving, you need to be eating better, but you've just really struggled to figure this whole thing out, to be consistent, to get anything going. And so this is help you put together day by day through consistent work so you get better, you move better, you feel better, and then you begin to build what you need to be who you need to be. And I'm doing a pre-launch right now, and I'll be doing it now. This is going to come out on the 5th. Today is pretty much the last day of the pre-launch. So if you go out there today at 40plusfitness.com/bootcamp, you can join and become a founding member. The founding members are going to get a special price, and they're going to get some other stuff that other people will not get. So this is a time to join when you're going to have an opportunity to become a founding member of the boot camp. And you don't want to miss this because this is pretty big. So at least go out and learn more. Maybe you need to think about it. Maybe you want to check some things out. I've got some more details out there. So go to 40plusfitness.com/bootcamp, and you'll learn more about the 40 Plus Fitness Fit for Task Boot Camp. And I hope you do join us. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I know it's going to change some lives. Our guest today is an award-winning journalist and the founder of TrueHop. He led ESPN's 60-person NBA digital and print team, which published several groundbreaking articles and won a National Magazine Award. With no further ado, here's Henry Abbott. Henry, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Your book was so much fun.
Thank you.
I've never considered myself ballistic, which is the name of the book. It's called Ballistic, the New Science of Injury-Free Athletic Performance. And I think that's really what drew my attention to the book, was that subtitle, in that a lot of times, particularly as older folks, we want to be more athletic. We want to have more power. We want to have these things. And so we try to train for them. And if we don't train right, we break. One of the big challenges, particularly for people over the age of 40, is just figuring out how I can train and not break myself.
I'm in that club. I'm on that journey. I'm in the struggle. Yeah. Every day.
But there's so much in this book that is a takeaway for, okay, now I understand why this happens. It's not just that I'm getting old and breaking. In many cases, I'm not recognizing that I have a bad movement pattern. And so I'm sort of set up, almost like predestined, if you will, to break if I'm not moving well. It really is a good reminder that we can do some things to improve our movement patterns. That's going to reduce our risk, and we can stay in the game much, much longer.
Yeah, I feel like we've been looking at the wrong thing. Mostly this industry has been driven by x-rays and MRIs, which are us lying still. It's the only time where that's still, right? Yeah. I've been on the MRI machine, and 40 minutes, they're like, don't move a muscle. I can never achieve that. You'll watch me wiggling during this interview on camera. But the cause of, in my case, I've had lower back issues. The cause of that is movement. And you literally want to see, if you're going to diagnose what's wrong with me, you want to see how I land, how I move when I'm running, all these twists and turns, and is my pelvis tilted or not? These are the critical factors for me. And you literally cannot see those things when I'm still. The journey here has been vast and involves how owls develop and running up hills and jumping off cliffs. It gets so sort of, I wrote it sober, but it's sort of trippy. I feel like the was like, woo, it's a journey. But ultimately the scientific underpinnings here are that the data set will shift from MRIs and scans to assessing how you move, because that's what causes our injuries. It's also what causes the cure.
Yeah. And that's what was exciting was, yes, you were all over the place, but that was because you're an adventurer and you like doing these things. And so you want to learn. So you're also that, and you put those two things together. It's the sports nerd, and it's some good stuff.
What's kind of fun is, I'm a little geeky, right? But I'm also just I think everybody listening to this podcast probably just has this urge to move their bodies and do something and go outside and be playful. And my wife jokes I'm a Weimaraner. Like, I'm the kind of dog that, like, if I don't run around, I'll be grouchy. But if I run around, I can handle anything, right? I'm fine. And those two things kind of coalesce in this book. There's some pretty geeky science. It's hardcore, the science they're doing in this book. But at the same time, the end game is, can you frolic in the waves with your kids? That's whatever your dream is. Like, that's where we're headed. Yeah.
Exactly. Because most of us aren't going to play in the NBA. We're in our 40s.
I am sorry to break it to you. Yeah.
But you're right. I do want to play with my grandkids in the waves and enjoy myself, be able to run in the sand, be able to play volleyball, be able to do the things that I enjoy doing for a lot longer. And most of us, though, we're not going to meet someone like Marcus. We're not going to go to a place like P3. We're going to go in and see the normal guy, the physical therapist or the orthopedic guy. And that leads us to what you called in the book, the 3 horsemen of free movement. Can you talk a little bit about that? We talked a little bit about MRIs, but can you talk a little bit more about why the current process for we'll call it healthcare, isn't really necessarily what we need to focus on for recovery.
Yeah, so you move around, you do whatever. No one teaches you how to run. No one teaches you how to land. No one teaches you anything about your hips or all these things that, how your foot hits the ground. You just do whatever. And then something gets painful and you probably just push through that, right? Because you're tough. And it gets worse. And then eventually you end up, well, in my story, I went to my primary care physician who doesn't even attempt a diagnosis because this soft tissue stuff is like way beyond, right? Then you go to the physical therapist and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you go to the radiologist. And eventually, if it's bad enough, you go to the orthopedic surgeon. And the orthopedic surgeon gives you these terrible options, right? Maybe you can get an injection, which, the odds are pretty bad that will cure it. Maybe you can get surgery, which very often the odds are worse than if you don't get surgery, that you'll end up doing the movement you want to do. Or you can just stop moving how you want to move. Right. So pharma is circling. They give you drugs. If you want drugs, you can always get drugs. Radiology is circling. Surgery is circling. These are the three horsemen. And none of them really have the magic keys to get you doing what you really want to do, which is move again. So this is where we're trying to move the attention and the cure upstream before you get into this crisis.
I tore my rotator cuff when I was 51.
I'm sorry.
And I knew I tore it, like not just a little tear. I knew that, okay, this was the massive one. This is the real one.
Wait, how did you know? Just from the devastating pain?
I dropped the dumbbell because I had every ounce of strength in my shoulder was gone for being able to do a press. And so I got the weight up, 2 inches and then pop, and it was done. And I knew I'd done it. It was probably a complete tear. But I decided, okay, I'm not just going to just any surgeon. I'm going to find the guy, And so I went to the guy who was a surgeon for a Division I football team because I said, your job as a surgeon is to try to get them back on the field, right? And he's like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to get back on the field. I don't care that I'm 51 years old. I want it fixed. And so, I did the MRI and we did all that. And he was a cool guy, like old school. He'd been doing this for 30 years. And so he'd done a lot of these. But he told me this, and I thought this was really interesting, that they did a study, looked at cadavers over the age of 90, and 100% of them had a torn rotator cuff at some point in their life. Wow. Some of them had surgery. Some of them were just partial. And then some of them had just let their life go. They just didn't do anything about it, just moved around that pattern. So this happens a lot where we begin to move wrong. We begin to feel pain. We begin to injure ourselves. We adjust our movement patterns and just go on with life. And then later on, that potentially could create additional problems.
So the book is about this guy, Marcus Elliott. And I was just in Santa Barbara the last few days, and he's all excited because no one knew this, but you can regenerate ACLs.
Okay.
New finding.
Is this like with stem cells or?
No, just our bodies just can do that. It does not everyone, not all the time, but we didn't even know that. I always wondered, there are a bunch of people who don't get ACL surgery. They used to essentially never recommend it for women because they were like, you're not going to need to move like that, back 50 years ago. And I always wondered what happened to them. Do they just not have ACLs or what happens? But this is new. We're just learning, but there are documented cases of people who tore their ACL, did nothing for it, and then it regenerates. I'm thinking about your shoulder, your rotator cuff people. I suspect we're going to find that all of the indicators of health, probably diet, exercise, all these things probably matter to how much is your body able to recuperate from all these things, right? We're all going to have a bunch of these things. Marcus has this phrase that I find enthralling and a little intimidating, but he's like, we're all going to have them. There's no way around it. His own body, if you scan it, has a bunch of little things. The trick is to have them be speed bumps.
Yeah.
Rather than, my lower back thing, the trick is, can I be out for 6 weeks and do some PT and then be back? Or does it need to be 18 months? Or never? Am I never bouncy again? Right? That's one of the options. It's a common option. Yeah. But I think, to your point, you're a little determined in finding the right surgeon, and I'm sure you did your PT assiduously.
Oh yeah, I found another PT who was the Division I level kind of guy, and so within 6 weeks I was back in the gym lifting. I wasn't lifting as much, and I've changed. I've put a lot more emphasis on form.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
And now as I move, I notice things with my left shoulder, and I'm like, okay, if I continue down the road I'm going, I may tear that one. So I have to make sure that and a lot of it's functional. How much weight do I really need to press over my head?
Probably
There
not
was
that
a time
much,
I
yeah.
had to be able to pick up a 65-pound ruck and throw it over my head and drop it down onto my shoulders. I don't have to do that anymore. A
Mhm.
30-pound bag, maybe putting in an overhead bin, that's that's the limit. So I don't have to lift that heavy.
One of the things that has come out of this is like there's some things as you age that you just want to let go. Like there's a little story about it, like a 61-year-old guy who's employing a whole team. He's a billionaire, so he can hammer dunk still at 60. But like, you're not going to land well. You can't take that. Let that one go. But your core rotation ability or your hip flexibility, hip mobility, having strong leg muscles, like these things you want to fight tooth and nail for, right? Because they actually predict a healthier, longer life.
And you want to be able to pick up your grandkid and you want to be able to play with them and play soccer and be the goalie and do all the things. And
Totally.
so, those are the things that matter, not impressing some teenagers that you're 60 and can dunk a basketball.
And you just can't do, I mean, like it takes so much, the force of landing from a dunk is really not something that your 60-year-old body is going to be able to, maybe it can, but it would be like world record setting kind of accomplishment.
The force is just not worth it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a few things that are fairly common for my age group and our age group, I guess. The first one was kyphosis. I've heard it called laptop neck or phone neck or iPhone neck or smartphone neck. Can you talk a little bit about what that is? And you had an exercise in the book that is definitely going to go into my next workout.
It's hard. It's hard, Allan, especially when it's new. It's hard.
Yeah.
So kyphosis, or they call it computer back at P3, is, really you've seen, I think almost a third of people have a form of this where you're just arched forward in your upper back. I have it. When I started writing the book, I was asking everybody at P3, what are the conditions that you've learned about here that normies have? And I'm realizing now I was doing like a psychological trick on them because they're looking at me while they're answering. And so everyone said kyphosis first. And I'm like, only years later when I knew them better, I'm like, wait, did you guys all say kyphosis because you were looking at me? And they're like, yeah, probably. But
well,
a third of them...
and you said it. You said like Marcus can look at someone. He's done this enough. He would basically at the beginning, he was the system. He could just look at someone, but they see people every day. Not all of them are professional athletes. They have others coming in, and they see this is happening, and it is so common. You just
super common.
Standing in line anywhere, just look around, and people are down on their phones. Their elbows are tight against their body, and we get stuck that way.
And it comes with a bunch of problems, injury problems and performance problems. In their data, just one of the little things is you can't move explosively laterally. I don't even really understand the biomechanics of why, but that's what they found consistently. A third of the NBA is like this, but it hampers them. Can't reach as high over your head for obvious reasons. You're just kind of bent over. It makes you shorter, essentially. But it also causes, in my case, it ended up causing a problem of, there are a lot of delicate nerves in the upper spine, and it's a strong, well-designed system when they're stacked on top of each other. But once they start to slip, your vertebrae it just becomes very delicate, and a lot of different things can upset it. And then, some bony body touches a nerve as it exits thing, or there's just so many ways it can go wrong. And then I thought I had a pretty massive shoulder soft tissue problem, but it was just the nerve in my neck, and it's they do this trick. The nerves do tricks on you, right? And and I just had to really fix my posture. Hope you'll probably see me now the rest of the podcast trying to be like super
Everybody
good
listening,
at this.
everyone listening is just like.
I've spent a lot of time. Part of the PT for this one was like lying face down on the PT table with a very light weight in each hand, and then I call it the cane or the goose, where you just have to like flap your big wings, right? Yeah. And I wish I would with all of these things, man. If I had been working out doing that little exercise, I'm 50. I started that at 25. Probably wouldn't be here. Probably wouldn't have to do all that round of PT. But now I think I got that one solved, which feels good. But yeah, that's a very common thing. Now you asked about the cure they prefer at P3, which is great. They claim that like 100% of people who really diligently add this to their workout can reverse their posture problems. It's called the Snatch Squat Press. I would honestly start with a broomstick and get into a squat, a real squat with your hips lower than your knees. And then you're just going to push the broomstick straight up over your head. And if you have kyphosis, you can't do it. You're going to hit the back of your head. In which case, put a rolled up towel under your heels and then kind of graduate through. And over time, you get to like an empty bar and then a weighted bar. For a while, I really added it, and everyone else in the gym, I would do it as a substitute for like people were doing burpees in my gym. I would do this, and everybody would come over and be like, "Man, what was that? That looked terrible. Like, what was that thing you were doing? That looks so hard." And I just had like 5-pound weights on it, but yeah. And then the coach would come around, and she's the form really matters, and she'd be like, "No, lower, lower, lower." I'm just like, "Oh, you got to really kind of psych yourself up." But 6 weeks in, I could totally do it.
Yeah, because I'll notice it if doing work mostly on machines or something for a period of time, like I'm traveling or something on machines, or I skip my workout for a couple weeks and I'm on the computer a lot. Mm-hmm. I'll start to notice it happen, and what will happen, and the way I feel it is I'll lay down like I'm going to do a bench press, and my head doesn't want to rest on the bench.
Oh, that's a sign. Yeah.
Yeah. My head doesn't want to touch the bench. I'm like, why is my head not on the bench when I'm laying flat on my back on the bench? And so I have to just lay there and relax and breathe. And then my head will slowly settle down onto the bench. I'm like, okay, I gotta start stretching out, work on my posture. But I'm glad I have this exercise now, so I definitely will.
Let me know how it goes. I bet you'll have an exciting report from day one.
Yeah, I've got a PVC pipe in my gym, so I'll start with that, and then I may have to put something under my heels to get that depth first. But yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Right, it's a feeling out process.
Yeah. And it's something I'll do on my own. So I won't be in a gym with people say, "Man, that looks hard."
It's motivating. If you're doing it in front of them, I'll tell you, it motivates you to get your form together.
Yeah. I'll do it at home for a little while until I feel like I can get it done. Yeah. All right. The next one, and I see this a lot in lifts, squats particularly, but I've even seen people running that have this valgus collapse. Mm-hmm. And I look at them, I just like, oh, that's just a terrible knee or knees waiting to happen. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why it's happening and what maybe we can do to?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest findings in the history of biomechanics is this, some people, when they bend their knees or squat, the knees dive in toward each other. It's known as valgus collapse. And like the angle of your quadriceps as you bend your knees is known as the Q angle. And there aren't a lot of things in biomechanics that have been super well established, but like one of the hardest core findings is that valgus collapse, bad Q angles, elevates your risk of knee injury. Like everybody agrees on this. And so at P3, when they really started doing motion capture, there are 22 little markers all over your body. And every time you squat, that's the one angle, or two angles, right side, left side Q angles, are two of the 230-ish angles they're measuring. And over time, they take this giant data set, roughly 1 million data points per assessment, and just compare it to outcomes. And there's like a machine learning kind of, cause effect studying going on there over years. And long story short is Q angle's not a significant factor in knee injuries, which is, maybe to listeners of this podcast, not alarming, but to people who write for academic journal, publish articles in the industry, this is poking the bear. This is a big fight. But the finding doesn't matter at all. So the finding is that it's sort of like moles and skin cancer, right? Like, sometimes a mole is just a mole, but you should get your mole checked out because it might be skin cancer, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with valgus collapse. What they find at P3 data is like one of the leading causes of catastrophic knee injury in NBA players is that as you squat, your femur rotates. It's like twisting the leg off the turkey at Thanksgiving. Your upper leg bone rotates as you bend, and that is a massive cause of ACL tear. And so you wanted that, and it might present as valgus. The solution there is that there are little muscles that hold your femur in place that are in your hip. There are these little notches on your femur called trochanters, and it's not rocket science to strengthen those muscles to stabilize your hip so that the femur won't rotate. But that's what you're trying to address. There are NBA players. I stood there at the NBA draft combine with the crew from P3, and there was a player they'd been training who was taking 3-pointers, and every time he dipped down, his knees went in. And I was like, "Hey, are we worried about that?" And they're like, "Nope, not with him. Like, he's fine. He doesn't have the other risk factors. So independently, valgus is not a big deal." And probably someone listening to this is like, "That's ridiculous. We've been studying it for 100 years." And I get it. It's a big change, but this is just a new data set with a new look, and it seems pretty convincing.
And they've, at this point, seen enough athletes come through, enough times past. They're like, okay, yes, this guy has this valgus collapse. He goes through his whole career, never has a knee problem.
It does elevate risk for non-catastrophic knee injuries in their findings. Like it has, it can, I forget what it's called, but it's something where you kind of like scar up the back of your kneecap. This kind of stuff happens. But an ACL tear and meniscus tear, these ones that keep you on the sideline for a year, like it's a non-factor when it's independent.
Okay. And if you notice that it's happening, you can do some strengthening exercises elsewhere and kind of resolve some of that.
Yeah. This is a variation of hip instability. And in general, I know you lift, you probably don't have this, right? You probably don't have hip instability, but a lot of people do, more common in women. And if you notice this is happening, I think it's worth generalized strength training for your hips, and it'll probably buy you quite a lot of time, make you feel stronger, better.
In the book, you talked a bit about shoes. You mentioned Innovates, which is what I wear.
Oh, cool.
So that's what caught my attention. It's like, that's my favorite shoe. Well, the 195 lights were, but they don't make those anymore.
I was a Trail Rock 245 guy, and they don't make that one anymore either.
What is up with that?
I know.
The best shoe ever made, and then they don't make it. I bought every single one I could buy off of Amazon. I had like 15 pairs. And then they just finally all fell apart. But
I still wear mine for gardening, and it's kind of like reminisce about when they were new.
The soles completely. I walked the soles off mine entirely, like gone. But should we be focused on our shoes if we want to protect ourselves?
It's a complicated topic. So there's a lower extremity review, is like a journal of lower extremities, and there's an article from not that long ago where they mentioned casually that there's never been a single pair of athletic shoes that was demonstrated in academic research to prevent injury. So everything anybody tells you about, you pronate. Remember that was a huge thing. Do you pronate?
Oh, yeah. The running guy at the shoe store would watch you run down there and then try to sell you a $150 pair of shoes.
Yeah, when you really wanted the $4 ones. Yeah. There've been all these things. Right? I know a lot of people now will tell me they really need Hokas or whatever. There's a bunch of different things, and I'm not telling you that it's not true. I'm telling you it's not researched. Yeah. Meanwhile, there are issues with shoes. So at P3, they are pretty big on having you land with your toes up on the ball of your foot with your ankle stiff, and then the force goes into your calves and glutes and quads, and your body's designed to absorb a lot of force like that. In some people, merely wearing conventional athletic shoes makes that less likely to happen. If they merely make you take your shoes off, which they often do at P3, and you land that way, you're going to land with just sort of naturally better form. So, and the most common way that happens is that, a regular shoe, not, we have zero drop shoes you and I were just talking about, right? But a lot of people are wearing conventional shoes, which are 10 millimeters higher in the heel than in the toe. This just pisses Marcus off so much because he's like, okay, well, if my 4-year-old has shoes that are 10 millimeter drop, that's like a much deeper angle than Shaquille O'Neal's shoe, which is practically flat. Like, how can both those angles be right? But more to the point, landing toes down is a 5-alarm fire. This is one of their least favorite ways to see you land, because what happens is your toes hit and then the rest of your mat, and don't absorb much of your force, and it's not a great way to absorb force anyway. Then here comes the crash into your heel. Your heel feeds via bone straight up to your knee. So you're delivering the force of impact from the ground to the little delicate tissues in your knee. At the same time, your upper body has 80% of your weight, and it's got the femurs driving all this force down into your knee. So you're putting this what could be the soft tissue, elastic interaction of your Achilles tendon and quads and glutes is now becoming this like bony interaction in your knee. And if it gets a little awry, that will mess some stuff up. So you don't want to land with your toes down, heel up. And a lot of shoes are designed that way. And I talked to the guy who was like one of the pioneers of this business. His name's Dave Bond, great guy, who knows all about shoe design. And he's like, the reason that, I'm going to say this carefully, the reason shoes have a 10 millimeter drop is because at the dawn of the industry, one company had a little visible see-through device that needed 10 millimeters to fit under your heel. And that's why it's 10 millimeters. So it's just what we're used to now. It was never performance-based. It was never injury prevention-based. And it's kind of a weird thing to carry on now.
Thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about hips, because I think that's a very underutilized and very underappreciated part of the human body. We think about our knees and we think about our ankles because we feel the pain there. But it's the hips that can be the biggest part of this problem.
Yeah, and they're also just kind of personal. There's like kind of got some like procreation elements down there, and like, I was like, like my 8th grade basketball coach talked about knees and ankles all the time. He never mentioned hips because he was kind of like a Norman Rockwell character. He was like very like Americana, like, he has hair perfect, and like his hips are just not welcome in that conversation, right? Meanwhile, I think that my writing this book was a little scary to Marcus because he's this Harvard MD and he has all of this knowledge in his head, and I'm a sports writer. I didn't go to Harvard or even close, and I'm coming at it and trying to say things in plain English, and so I'm trying to like take his knowledge and I'm like, is it right if I say this? Is it right if I say that? And at one point I was like, is it fair to say the hips are the brain of our movement? And at first I think he was like, no. But actually, just now, a couple years later, he's like, I think that's kind of right. I think that's you've convinced me. So, in a nutshell, hip isn't one thing. It's 16, 17, 20, 60 soft tissues and hard tissues, and they interact in really complicated ways that make us brilliant as humans. They permit us to run upright without, a cheetah can only run for 60 seconds before it overheats because it has to exhale with every big step. But we have our lungs separated from our legs, and you can really move all day. And it lets our brains be big, lets us have language. Brilliant. But they have some requirements. And essentially, they need mobility and stability. And this is one of the places where I was able to tease out from P3 ways to really manage your body at home without going to get whatever it costs, multi-$1,000 assessment from a professional. Yeah. So in a nutshell, if you can, did you know the standing figure 4? Are you familiar with this move?
Oh, that's without using your hands?
Yeah. So it's basically the pigeon, but you're standing up. So say you're on your left, sending all of your weight on left leg. You can lean on the wall if you want. Put your right ankle across your left knee, just above the knee, and then really just sit down, chest up, butt back, and like sit low. And if you can really get into that position, get your hips low, then their kind of homespun assessment is that you're probably mobile enough, right? Your hips are probably, they need to be mobile in lots of directions, but that's a pretty good test of how they are. And then the other one is if you can get in a side plank with your body in a big X, leg elevated, arm up, all 10 toes pointing forward, which is not common. If you can hold that for 30 seconds on each side, then they would say that your hips are stable enough. And I think what we'll find is that nobody can do both of those things. Yeah. And so basically the idea is you're in one of those camps right now and work on it. That's part of your maintenance now. If your hips aren't stable enough, you might need hip replacement because of that. If your hips aren't mobile enough, you might need replacement one day because of that. So know which camp you're in and work on it. And you can kind of, in Marcus's words, get in the game of keeping your hips snappy and letting you do fun things with your grandkids for the long haul.
My uncle he's only 2 years older than me, and he just had a hip replacement.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. Some people have a hip replacement. They want you up moving around, and they're fine 3 weeks later. That was not the case for him. He's still not right there. But, we sit so much now. We're in a seated position. We're commuting. We're at home. We're at work. And we're just always sitting down. And that's really going to mess with that mobility over time. So, yeah, this is an area where I think you want to just make sure you're spending some time to build that mobility. If you lift and you do compound movements, your stability is probably closer to okay. I don't think you can do the side plank star thing, but you could probably do a side plank. If you can do a side plank, I'd say over 40, you're probably doing all right.
They do weighted side planks. This became part of my take home from there. At first, I hated side planks without weight. They recalibrate your expectations for yourself. And next thing you know, I'm doing I have a 30-pound medicine ball on my upper hip as I'm doing a side plank, and you have to do 3 sets of 30 seconds. And I made some grunting sounds in my home that made my family uncomfortable, doing that. But ultimately, the glute med is we talk about the gluteus maximus, but the glute medial is very important to your hips. And this is really targeting that in just kind of a mass way. I really found, so I went from taking my mother-in-law to PT after hip replacement day after day to P3 where NBA players were preparing to be drafted and play in the league. And they were doing the same side planks, same clamshell, same. And so I was like, is Chet Holmgren over here, the future star of the Oklahoma City Thunder, is he doing the same work that will prevent him needing hip replacement one day? And no one's researched this, but they were like, I think so. I think so. So part of me is like, man, too bad my mother-in-law didn't do this PT before she needed surgery, right?
Yeah.
These things are available to us now. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and haven't yet had hip replacement, maybe give it a whirl.
Awesome. Henry, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get well?
I think everybody should think about some plyometrics. Jumping rope is one. You probably have a sense right now of what you're comfortable doing, but most injuries come from your landing going a little awry, might even be while jogging. And plyometrics are a great way to tune up the neurological timing of your landing. So I wouldn't be the right person to advise you on exactly what progression, but there are lots of things available. Somebody in your life knows about plyometrics. I would just start down that path a little bit. So that's number one. They have this joke at P3 that everyone who does yoga should lift weights, and everyone who lifts weights should do yoga. And this is about that hip, stability, mobility thing. We know this, right? Like, I'm guessing everybody you lift weights with kind of thinks they should do yoga, right? You kind of know, right? And I think maybe more news is that the people at yoga, who I always thought they just were more advanced than us, but I think in fact it's news to them that they could, in many cases, if you have very mobile hips, you would benefit from some weightlifting, from some, squatting under the bar, this kind of stuff. It's fun. I find it's fun at my age to be new at something, and to it's whatever feels really new out of those 2 things, get into it, right? It's just added a little bit once a week, whatever. And the third one is play. I really feel like we have to do some stuff at our age that isn't that fun to keep our bodies maintained, PT or, rigorous maintenance workouts. But I think we probably all know what's the thing that's just at the edge of our ability. Maybe there's a tennis game you used to go to, but you don't go to anymore. Maybe you're thinking about trying pickleball. Maybe you want to surf or whatever. But I think that in general, you want these things to be extremely fun because that's your motivation to keep moving. That's your motivation to keep yourself in shape for your grandkids. So I think you probably know, if you just reflect right now, like, what's the really fun thing that you're not sure you should do? I think explore it. Give it say yes to more things. I think that is a really powerful long-term idea.
Right. Thank you. If someone wanted to learn more about you, learn more about your book, Ballistic, where would you like for me to send them?
I think the sort of home base of that right now is henryabbott.com, and everybody spells my name different ways, but for the record, it's Henry. That part they usually get, and then it's A with 2 B's and 2 T's, ABBOTT. I also have a free newsletter called Writing Activity, where it just has a sort of brain dump of cool new things that come across the transom. But you can order the book and see all sorts of kooky stuff, videos, different things that are happening around this space are all there.
Awesome. Henry, thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, it's been great. Thanks so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we bring back Dr. Del Bredson and discuss his book, The Ageless Brain, How to Sharpen and Protect Your Mind for a Lifetime. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.